So what we're going to talk about today is installing memory inside of your computer. It's one of the easiest things to do to increase the speed in your system. Often I get a lot of customers that want their computer sped up, and really what it boils down to is just slapping some memory in there would make a significant difference, much more than optimizing. Those commercials that say that they're going to double or triple the speed of your computer just by some registry tweaks or some software, not going to happen. In fact, if you look at the small print, it says not typical results, just like those late night infomercials. Installing memory in your computer almost always will give you a significant increase in speed, depending on how much you have to start off with. A lot of computers have 512 meg or 1 gig, which is 512 times 2. So if you're around that range, then you may want to consider doing this. Computers that have 2 to 4 gig, that's kind of the nice area. It depends on what operating system you're running. But generally, if you're in between the 2 and 4 gig, you're good. If you have 4 gig or more, then you really don't need to do this. And if you're at 4 gig, you probably don't need to do this either. It just depends on what you're doing with your computer. Definitely the less amount of memory you have, the bigger the impact. So for example, a customer that has 512 meg of RAM, or actually I have a computer where I'm working on right now, the customer has 1 gig of RAM in their computer. Their computer runs incredibly slow. It runs Windows Vista. By taking them to 2 gig, they'll probably see a speed increase of at least 30%, if not more. It's a substantial increase. And the cost of adding the memory, it depends on the kind of memory in the computer and several different factors, but generally speaking, the cost of going from 1 gig to 2 gig would be $75 to $100, maybe even less. They actually have the older, more expensive memory. So there's a couple things we need to do. First, you need to get the right kind of memory for your computer. You can do this, you can check the kind of memory that your computer has a couple different ways. If you know how to go into the BIOS, you can do that. If not, a lot of times on the front of the computer there'll be a sticker that says what kind of memory it has in there. And if you're not sure that way, you can pull up a website, Google it, called Crucial, and you can put in the manufacturer, make, and model. For example, Dell Inspiron 1501 or something. You can put that into the website and it'll tell you what kind of memory it needs. Or you can just look around on the internet with the make and model, find the specs from the manufacturer's website. So that's one of the most important things. Find the make and model so that you get the correct kind of memory for your computer. Generally, it falls into 3 different categories. There's DDR, DDR2, and DDR3. If you have a computer that has DDR3, you probably are not needing to upgrade your memory. DDR2, you may need to upgrade your memory. DDR1, your computer is probably pretty old and can really use the increase in memory if you want to spend the money to do it. Inside of each of those categories, there are a whole bunch of different speeds for it. If you can get the same kind, then that's great. Generally, there's not a lot of price difference in the little variations inside of those categories. For example, DDR1 has like a PC 3200, or it says DDR 400, and there are lower settings than that. You just get the fastest one. It's not going to make really any difference in the price. So number 1, get the right kind of memory. Number 2, we open up the computer, which is often the hardest part. And then number 3, just slide them right in. I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a second. Well, you want to make sure that you try not to pull any wires loose inside of the computer. There are not hundreds of wires all over the place. So you don't have to be paranoid. It's not like you're doing brain surgery or anything, but don't go in there and start yanking things all over the place as well. And make sure that you're not carrying a static charge. Static electricity is the enemy of computers. So your memory modules can be destroyed, or inside of the computer can be destroyed if you give it a shock, like you would do if you touched a door while shuffling across the carpet. Good precaution would be to wear some kind of shoes while you're doing this. Try to do it, if you can, not on carpet. Take it to the kitchen or something like that and do it in there. For the most part, you're going to be fine. You touch the casing somewhere before you start working inside of it, and you're good to go. Once you got the memory installed, so step 1 is open up the case. Step 2, insert the memory. Step 3, close the case, plug it back in, turn it on. If you have any problems, you'll hear beep tones. They're different for the manufacturers, but your computer will do some kind of beeping noise. Don't freak out. You can just pull out the memory chip. You can first make sure that it's seated properly. If it's seated properly, you can try to shuffle them around because you'll see that there's more than one in there. And sometimes that fixes it. Worst case scenario, you can just pull out the memory chip, put in the original, see if it boots up fine. Alright, here we have a standard computer case. This is for an E-machine. Many of them are exactly the same. So the first thing we need to do when installing more memory into the computer is to open up the case itself. Now, this is probably the actual hardest part of the entire project, is figuring out how to get the case open. Once you got that done, everything else is pretty easy. The reason why it's difficult is because so many cases are made differently by different manufacturers, so there's no one standard on how cases operate. Often, the most common way is over in the back. There will be two screws in one side or the other of the case that will open it up for you. Um, Now, what side should you look on? You don't want to take apart the entire case. In fact, only one half of it will need to come off. If you look at right here, here's where we have all of our ports. And where the ports are, the motherboard is going to be on this side. So we want to access the opposite side of the case, over here. So since all the ports and everything are over here, we're going to open the opposite side. Now, on this case, there's two spots where screws go in. You just have to tell by looking at the case, and you can tell in this situation because you can see the frame of it right along here. It might be kind of difficult because it's black. Some of them will have big bulgy things right here where you can undo the screws with your hands. Some may have a little lock, some Dells have a little button that you push down here. It's just different for so many computers. Some of them, well, that's just the standard is this. We'll stick with that. So I've already got the screws out, and there's a little slide mechanism that you can see an indent for right here. That's another good hint that the case comes off this way. So we're just going to push on it towards the back, and you see it comes right off. So that's frankly the hardest part about installing memory in a computer. We're going to lay the computer on its side. Oh, I'm sorry. Also good to unplug all of the items. And when you unplug them, try to make note of where you're unplugging them from so that you can put them back in the same order, especially with USB ports. It's not going to hurt anything if you shuffle the USB ports around, but often it'll treat it as a new device and we'll have to go through installing everything again. It'll do it automatically, but you just avoid it if you can. So now that we got all the ports unplugged, here we got the inside of the computer. Once we are in the computer, we are going to locate the memory chip. And in this case, here's the inside of the computer. Notice it's not actually very scary. The cords and wires, and then the main part is called the motherboard down here. This right here, this big thing with the fan, this is going to be your CPU. What you're looking for is something that looks like this, these two chips right here. So this computer, if we wanted to upgrade the memory, we would have to remove one of the chips in order to put a bigger one in there. Some computers work in pairs, so generally it's best to do pairs if possible. This is an older computer, so it doesn't have pairs. In this one we have two slots. This is one slot, and this is the second slot. Some computers have 4 slots, so it just depends on what you're working with. On the sides right here are little latches, and all you do is push down on the latch, and it unlocks the memory module from this side. Same thing on the other side over here. It's going to be a little difficult to see, but if we just push down on the latch, it is released from that side. So now I can actually pull out this memory chip, and this is what your memory chip looks like. So, assuming that you have a couple slots available that are not used, you go to the store, you buy 2 of these, and you just slide them down into the computer, and I'll show you that in just a second. If you don't have any slots available, like this computer, then you will have to remove these and buy ones with a larger size. So, to install this guy, it's just the exact same thing in reverse. Notice one side, the left side, is slightly shorter than the right side, and there's a notch in the middle. That notch right there is telling you that this is keyed. It only goes in one way. So you don't want to force it when you put it in. You will have to use a little bit of force to snap them down, but you want to make sure that you got the notch lined up right. So we're going to go ahead and put this back down, and because I just took it out, I know which way it goes. Really, the way you tell is it's going to be very difficult to see, but there's a little notch in the socket that it's sitting in. You want to make sure the notch for the chip matches up with the notch in the socket. Once done, try to push evenly on both sides. Sometimes it's kind of hard and you just can't. So that side's locked. I'm going to do this side now. That side's locked, and that's pretty much it. The memory chip is installed. So I just showed you how to remove and reinstall or add new memory to a computer. So what you would do is, if this chip were, for example, 256 megabytes on that one chip, you would remove this 256 megabyte and put in a 512 or a 1024 chip. That gives you the additional memory for your computer, and your computer will run much faster in most situations. If your computer has more than 4 gig of RAM, probably not necessary. The kind of sweet spot is between 2 and 4 gig, depending on your operating system and the things that you do with it. But memory is always, it's relatively inexpensive. You see how quick and easy it is to do this, and yeah, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Be careful. I mean, it is possible to knock loose some of the wires in here. If you use just a little bit of caution, you should be fine. So you know, it's a pretty straightforward video. Lastly, the one thing that I did forget to mention is when you're doing this, touch the case and try not to wear socks on carpet. Static electricity is the enemy of computers. So you want to make sure that you are insulated from that. For example, in my situation, I had some boots on, so I'm pretty well shielded from the carpet. It's best if you try to stand on a hard floor instead of a carpet altogether. Just anything to avoid static electricity. That's what's killer for the computers. And then if you touch the case, as I'm doing right here, it kind of neutralizes the static charge that you have inside of you. So, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Nick@PCComputerGuy.com. That's Nick@PCComputerGuy.com. My website, www.pccomputerguy.com. Thank you.